Today, the Kremlin finally announced its conditions that Putin is bringing to Trump to end Russia's war against Ukraine. The Kremlin dictator Vladimir Putin is allegedly offering the United States president, quote, a convenient way out of the situation. This was stated by the Kremlin's foreign policy advisor, Dmitry Suslov. According to him, Putin expects two possible scenarios at the summit with Trump, which will take place in Alaska, and in both scenarios. The Russians have finally explained what territorial exchange the Kremlin is talking about. And this does not concern the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions. As previously stated, Putin is trying to present this as some kind of unrealistic concession from him, which Donald Trump might fall for. Moreover, Suslov claims that Putin is now giving Trump an opportunity to get out of the situation he got himself into. And supposedly, Trump is now trapped, and Putin is trying to save him from this situation. At the same time, Volodymyr Zelensky stated that the Ukrainian armed forces will not withdraw from Donbas, as this would open the way for Russian occupiers to seize new territories. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is August 12th. We'll go through everything step by step, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link is in this video's description. Thanks for watching. So, today, Vladimir Putin's aide on foreign policy, Dmitry Suslov, in an interview with the newspaper Karriera DLSR, voiced the conditions that Putin put forward to Trump for ending Russia's war against Ukraine. According to him, Putin expects two possible scenarios at the summit, which will take place in Alaska on August 15. The first is the adoption of a bilateral Russian-American plan to achieve a ceasefire. The article by Karriera DLSR states that it is supposedly fundamentally important from the Kremlin's point of view that the agreement is only between the Russian Federation and the United States of America, without Ukraine and without Europe. Putin insists that only he and Trump together should sign some kind of agreement. This plan, according to the Kremlin's idea, may include the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from those areas of Donbas where they are still present, and the withdrawal of Russians. Attention from Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk and Kharkiv regions while maintaining the front line in other areas. That's the whole so-called exchange. In fact, the Russians told Trump that they control some large areas of territory in Kharkiv, Sumy and Dnipropetrovsk regions. Trump believed it, and now Putin is promising to withdraw troops from there, not from the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions. There, the Kremlin is just proposing to freeze the front line. Now, Trump supposedly believes Russians control much of Kharkiv, Sumy and Dnipropetrovsk regions. That's why he thinks it's supposedly fair that the occupiers withdraw from there and the armed forces of Ukraine withdraw from the territory of Donbas. And unfortunately, even Western media fell for this manipulation. Suslov says in an interview with Karriera DLSR that supposedly a year ago Moscow demanded the complete withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from all 4 occupied regions, but now is only asking for them to leave Donbas. And that's why everyone should be happy about this and agree. But what happens next? Suslov states that a key part of the peace agreement is Ukraine's commitment not to join NATO. Suslov emphasized that refusing to join NATO is supposedly a mandatory and inevitable condition. Next is a quote. The final agreement should naturally include the demilitarization of Ukraine and a constitutional reform towards federalization. Putin is bringing all these conditions to Trump in Alaska. But Suslov says there's also a second outcome from the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. This is the rejection by the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and the European partners of the solution that Putin is proposing. And then, according to the Russians, Trump completely stops all military aid to Kyiv and even stops selling weapons to the Europeans so that they can transfer them to Ukraine. As Suslov says, this will speed up Ukraine's defeat and total collapse. And now, I'll give you the full quote from Suslov, in which he confidently claims that it was Donald Trump who supposedly trapped himself and now has to agree to Putin's terms because Putin is thus saving the American president. Here is Suslov's exact quote. If Trump supports the agreement with Russia so decisively, almost enthusiastically, then it's also because he put himself in a difficult position. After asking China, India, and Brazil to stop importing Russian oil and threatening them with secondary sanctions, China is obviously saying no. But New Delhi and Brazil will never do this either, and their refusal will be problematic for America. In this case, Trump will either back down showing weakness, or he will be drawn into a serious political and trade conflict with China and two key Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa members, with an unpredictable outcome. However, if the summit in Alaska continues, is successful, and a joint plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine is approved, the fuse that he recklessly lit with China, India, and Brazil will be extinguished. The American president might even claim historical significance. That's why we expect Trump to accept Putin's proposal. For him, it's exactly a way out. So, do you understand how the Russians are turning the situation around right now? Basically, the Kremlin official is saying that Trump has no choice but to accept Putin's terms, who is supposedly making concessions. So where does this phrase about exchanging territories come from? At the same time, when asked what kind of territorial exchange configuration the Americans are proposing, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, emphasized, quote, "We will not leave Donbas. We cannot do that." Everyone forgets the first part. Our territories are illegally occupied. Zelensky noted that for the Russians, Donbas is a springboard for a future new offensive. Quote, "If we leave Donbas of our own will, or if we are pressured, we will open a third war." Why was Crimea 100% a springboard for an offensive on the south of our country? Donbas was 100% a springboard for not caring about the citizens of Ukraine, not using their own people, not carrying out any mobilization. Sorry to put it this way, but that's how it is. And to turn the separatists into the Russian army, what next? Zelensky added that one of the strongest parts of the Russian offensive forces were actually people recruited from Ukrainian territories occupied after 2014. In other words, a foothold was being formed for a full-scale invasion. Quote, "After the full-scale invasion. If today we leave Donbas, our fortifications, our terrain, the heights we control, we will clearly open a foothold for the Russians to prepare an offensive. In a few years, Putin will have an open path to Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions, and not only that, also to Kharkiv. And that's why, in my opinion, any question of territory cannot be separated from security guarantees. Otherwise, they want to undermine it now. To give them about 9,000 square kilometers, that's about 30% of Donetsk region. And that's a foothold for new Russian aggression. United States Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth claims that it was Donald Trump who forced dictator Putin to negotiate and make concessions. Well, Senator Lindsey Graham in turn explained what exactly made Putin agree to meet with Trump. And according to him, it was Donald Trump's plan called Peace Through Strength that worked. What kind of strength, however, is still unclear. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video or by using the QR code on your screen. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.